Okay, so completely unscripted video from here, mostly because this came out of nowhere last week, and I spent the past couple days trying to get my thoughts together on it. So, middle of last week, Lionel randomly dropped a brand new little catalog previewing a brand new HO scale Berkshire for 2025. Now, I know Berkshire is probably going to get a lot of people kind of scared, especially since the last Lionel Ho Berkshire wasn't that great. I thought it was fine. A lot of people did not, and I understand I'm in the minority here. But this is not the train set Berkshire that Lionel has been offering us for the better part of a decade now. This is a completely new, from the ground up build of a Van Swearingen Burke, and I actually think Lionel's making a real proper attempt to get into HO for potentially what may be the first time ever. So, just a very quick abridged version of Lionel HO's history. In the 1960s, the post-war era, they imported a couple of things to sell under their name as HO, mostly Ather and a couple of Rivarossi models, with a couple of in-house things, namely a 242, an 060, and a couple other locomotives. In the 1970s, they imported stuff from Cater, a company that owns Bachmann, so those became Bachmann products later on. And in the early 2000s, they imported something from Korea Brass, a Challenger and a UP Veranda turbine. In 2017, they released a Lionel HO Berkshire with passenger cars. Now, these are the first originally tooled Lionel HO stuff, and a lot of people were fairly happy with it because the prices on them were reasonable, the quality was fine, and it was all just fairly good. But that was not a super detailed locomotive, and the cars definitely were not either. This, however, is new from the ground up and looks to be Lionel's first ever in-house super detailed HO scale model. Okay, let's start by saying this is a Berkshire. This is a Van Swearingen style Burke, kind of a Midwestern and Eastern U.S. locomotive. Now, a lot of people are not happy with them choosing a Berkshire, and I don't get it. We have had Van Swearingen style Burks in the past, but there's only one in production right now, and that's the Bachmann one. Previous ones, the MTH has a tooling that I feel looks absolutely awful. The Proto 2000 tends to crack gears, and some of the drive wheels aren't even painted on those. Plus, they've been renowned to be fairly terrible pullers in their first run, as top of being rare. You have the Rivarossi ones. It's a Rivarossi engine. It doesn't look great. It doesn't pull great. It's fine for the time. And currently, right now, we have the Bachmann one, which is a budget model and generalizes more features of the Van Swearingen Burke to make it more malleable to different roads. It's intended to be a mass production, low-cost locomotive, and it does that stellarly. So it's kind of exciting to see a Van Swearingen Burke get the treatment I feel it deserves for such a iconic locomotive. Flipping over the cover, you have the C&O ones front and center. These are the newest ones and the ones with the most different body style to the regular Van Swearingen Burkes, namely with that low headlight. So first off, first impressions, these look really good. Lionel has never had the best renders, and we've actually seen production samples that we'll get into later, courtesy of a friend of mine, that look really good. But in the rendering, I can see things like what appears to be an opening window. There's valves everywhere. Everything is a separately detailed part. They're promising lit marker lights, and it all just looks very, very good. The driver centers are painted. That was one of my big criticisms of Lionel's products in the past. But namely, the more important thing that I see on this is the lock sound. Now, this isn't a Lion Chief engine. The Lion Chief DCC hybrid, for some people, they really liked it. If you were trying to run that engine on just regular DCC, however, the engine was not exactly the happiest with it. So I think going with lock sound is very, very smart, especially since they have recordings of the real-life nickel plate 765 on there, and that's a very good sounding file. I've heard it in person, and I think it is going to be absolutely perfect for this model here. Now, some other stuff. This is a die-cast engine. This isn't a plastic engine, and a lot of people in the price are saying, yes, this is way too expensive. And I concur. However, I think it's important to look at a manufacturer like Broadway Limited, who makes these brass hybrid engines. Brass is cheaper to work with than die-cast is, and Lionel is creating all new molds for these engines, and a die-cast mold is more expensive than a plastic mold, and it is more expensive than brass. Lionel expects to sell a bunch of these, and so I'm expecting to see the price go down over the years. So other features, LED lighting, so that's including the marker lights and regular headlights, and knowing Lionel, it's probably going to have a cab light as well as a reverse and a firebox flicker. There are road-specific details. This is something the Bachmann one really doesn't do very well, so very, very good on that. Separately applied detailing, that's something we've been asking for years, and they have listened. Detailed cab interior with crew figures. That's something Lionel's been doing recently, and I am here for it. All-wheel pickup, that's nothing new. Metal knuckle couplers, 20-inch minimum curve radius, so this will run on Lionel's fast track, as well as a tethered connection to the tender. Now, the lock sound versions feature fan-driven smoke, so I assume this is the Lionel in-house unit, and if it smokes anywhere near half as good as my 060, I think this is going to be a stellar locomotive. So, there's a couple C&O liveries here. There's 3 regular ones, and then there's a fantasy scheme. A lot of people are dogging on this fantasy scheme, but I don't mind it, honestly. If fantasy schemes are your thing, go for it, and I think Lionel's look a little goofy, but sometimes we like it goofy here, right? So coming over to the nickel plate ones. These are the ones that everyone knows I'm going to be most excited about. So here is what I see. I see a lot of good, especially in these nickel plate ones. So first off, the road-specific detailing, it's got a Mars light. It's got the compressor exhaust. And it's got a third dynamo, which is a preservation-era 765 thing. But you know what? This is the first one to see it. And these look stellar. I'm genuinely really excited, and I may end up picking up a nickel plate one for a review in the future. Now, other liveries down here, the very, very controversial silver and blue one that they did in O-gauge is back. And you know what? I liked it in O-gauge. I kind of like it here. It doesn't have the ribbed sides, and I think that does make it look a little bit better. The Golden Spike Limited Burkshire, that's something we haven't seen in a while in HO, so props to them for that. Pure Marquette ones. These are, it's the Pure Marquette. They've got the dynamos in different positions, but otherwise these are pretty similar to the rest of them, and I don't really find too much to talk about with them. 1225 and 1216 there. So that's really all it is for these Berkshires, and I think that Lionel's trying to turn their HO line around. I am really excited for these, but $750 for the lock sound and $650 for the DCC ready. Ooh, that's going to be a very hard sell. I know it's going to be cheaper at retailers, and I want to see what retailers have them for. But judging by the photos that we have of the sample, it's just a resin printed sample, so it's not going to be the final product. I am very, very excited for these. It very much looks like Lionel is putting their best foot forward and taking essentially their O-scale legacy Berkshire and trying to scale it down to what the HO Berkshire should have always been. Now, there's a couple things that I am not super pleased about, namely the connection for the marker lights, mostly because there's holes in the front and the wires are very obvious. I do very much hope that people at the hobby show in Amherst brought that up with Lionel, and I hope they fix that in the future. But otherwise, looking at photos of these samples, these look so good. And I can't really criticize too much about these because this is going to be the highest end Van Swearingen Berkshire that we've ever seen, and I believe that this is going to be a locomotive that has a chance to make or break Lionel's HO scale world. That's all I have. That's just kind of my general thoughts on this thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, but I am very excited for these, and I'm very much ready to see a new Van Swearingen Berkshire in HO. MTE signing off.